Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Sweet Obsession by D.A. Young, narrated by Sean Crisden and Morae Brehon. It's better to cross the line and suffer the consequences than to just stare at it, wondering for the rest of your life. Unknown. Prologue, 1992. Whiskey Row, Tennessee. The turnout for the funeral service atop a high hill, just outside of town, was sparse. The only attendees were Reverend Melton, Jeb the undertaker, a handful of drunken men, and 3 boys. The boys listened stoically as the man of God struggled to find decent things to say about the deceased. Eventually, he stopped trying when he noticed the second oldest boy sneering at him. He glared at the lad and quickly finished his brief speech before letting the other men speak. They bemoaned the death of their drinking partner, blathering on about how much liquor he'd been able to consume in one sitting. When they finally walked away, they patted the shoulder of each boy, slurring their condolences. Still, the young trio remained silent. Standing next to the grave, the boys watched dirt slowly fill the hole and cover the casket. It had been a depressing affair. Nothing like the glorious service held a week earlier in the cemetery where the entire town came to pay their respects as the angelic voices of the church choir filled the sky. On that day, the townspeople wailed and cried, feeling the tragic loss of one of their own. The many dishes of food brought to the Sullivan doorstep would feed the boys for at least 2 months. Yes, this turnout was different, but it was one the boys wouldn't have missed for the world. Reverend Melton stopped next to the group. He studied each of their identical stone-faced expressions, searching for a sign of compassion. None would be forthcoming. Like their parents, the boys were incredibly good-looking. Jackson was the eldest, and resembled his dear mother the most, down to his calm personality. Standing tall at 5 feet 10 inches, he sported short black hair and a solemn pair of hazel eyes. Already he appeared wise beyond his 13 years, as he assumed the now available role of the family patriarch. 11-year-old Darby was the second eldest, and unfortunately resembled their bastard of a father. A strapping lad, he had thick reddish-brown hair that fell to his shoulders in thick sheets, with a pair of dark, stormy green eyes. Many a blistering lecture had been given to him because of his constant mischief, but he shrugged it all off with the Sullivan devil-may-care attitude and a shit-eating grin. And then there was Casey, the baby of the family, at 8 years old. He inherited his dark blonde hair from his paternal great-grandfather, and it was cut in a bowl shape that framed his delicate face. Being small in stature due to a fever at birth had earned him the unpleasant title of Little Shit from their father. His bright hazel eyes filled with tears as he, too, stared at the gravesite. Clearing his throat, the Reverend began somberly. "Boys, I'm sorry for your loss. It's bad enough to lose your mother, but to also lose your father."
"We didn't lose our mother. She was taken from us, Reverend,"
Darby interjected scathingly. Casey clutched his thigh, sniffing quietly, and Darby ruffled his hair reassuringly. Reverend Melton shot the redhead a censorious frown as he bent down to console Casey. The lad twisted away from them and launched himself at his eldest brother. Jack picked him up with an easy familiarity and rubbed his back, comforting Casey as sobs shook his tiny body. Helpless, the man of God could only watch as the inconsolable little boy cried harder. Addressing Reverend Melton, Jack nodded his head and spoke for the first time that morning.
"Thank you for your time today, sir. We appreciate you coming out in this weather to assist us with this matter. Drive safely back to town, okay?"
Realizing he'd been dismissed, and by a 13-year-old lad, no less, Reverend Melton simply nodded and made his way down the hill, saying prayers for them the entire way. The grave was now a quarter of the way filled. Jeb was working fast because the University of Tennessee was playing against Vanderbilt in less than an hour, and he didn't plan to miss that football game. Jack and Darby exchanged a meaningful look before Jack spoke up.
"Hey, Jeb, why don't you go on ahead and get out of here? Darby and I can finish up."
"Oh, hell, I can't leave you two to bury your pappy. It ain't the Christian thing to do,"
Jeb protested while discreetly sneaking a peek at his watch. Darby's contemptuous snort made the old man stiffen with indignation.
"Oh, man, please. You're as much a Christian as the devil is an angel."
Jack hid a smile as Jeb scowled at his younger brother. Darby didn't cower, meeting the older man's glare head-on.
"One of these days, Darby Sullivan, one of these days,"
Jeb threatened, taking a step toward the little bastard, who, instead of retreating, fisted up and puffed his chest out, a challenging smirk on his face. Jack stepped between them, giving Jeb a hard look.
"But today ain't that day. Jeb, thank you kindly for your time. We can take it from here."
The old man shrugged. What did he care? He would still be paid regardless.
"Suit yourself, young'un."
He dropped the shovel and tipped his hat, murmuring,
"My condolences to your family."
Then he took off running down the hill to his truck, hoping like hell the boys had saved him a seat at the bar. It was a cool afternoon. The sky overhead was clear, but in the distance, dark, ominous clouds promised a whopping thunderstorm and rain showers that would last a couple of days. The boys had carefully studied the Weather Channel's 10-day forecast last week after burying their mother, and specifically picked this day. Soon, it would be time. But for now, they settled down to wait. Jack walked over to the large backpack he'd packed earlier this morning and took out some sandwiches and sodas. Darby pulled the blanket out, and they all sat down to eat in silence, lost in their individual thoughts. Full off a half-eaten peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Casey soon drifted to sleep in Darby's lap.
"So, what's the plan, Jack?"
Darby mumbled around a mouthful of bologna, mustard, and wheat. His older brother was the only person in the world he would listen to and follow blindly. His back bore the marks of his father's belt buckle for his outright defiance, and his ears had often been scorched by his mama's lectures. But all Jack had to do was look at him, and Darby would cut all bullshit aside. Jack looked up at the sky. The black clouds were closer, resembling an oil slick spreading their way. Soon, he thought, visions of anticipation spreading along his skin.
"I spoke to Aunt Kelly in Memphis. She's willing to take us in."
He didn't mention that in exchange for room and board, he would give his money-hungry aunt some of the money his mother had secretly saved for them. Aside from his brothers, Jack wanted nothing more to do with anyone named Sullivan, let alone live with a complete stranger. But he needed to make sure they didn't get separated.
"The goal is for us to stay together, no matter what. It's what Ma would have wanted."
Thunder rumbled angrily, and the clouds were now directly over them, ready to impart their fury.
"Come on, Darby. It's time."
They rose to their feet, leaving Casey to sleep restlessly on the blanket. Darby reached into the backpack and pulled out a can of lighter fluid before following Jack to the open grave. When they suggested the deceased be buried out of town, no one had put up much of a protest. Patrick Sullivan was truly an evil man, and the town was relieved to be rid of him. The only protest had come from lazy old Jeb when they requested that a deeper-than-normal grave be dug. Without looking at each other, the brothers swiftly unzipped their pants and relieved themselves into the ditch of Patrick's perpetual resting place. Once finished, Darby contemptibly spat into the hole, then shook lighter fluid down into it. When the can was empty, he held it up for his brother to see, then threw it into the hole. Jack reached into his pocket and produced a lighter. He flicked it open, and a blue flame shot out, almost hypnotizing him with its sway. As he spoke, his voice took on the Irish lilt that only surfaced when the boys were emotional.
"We do this to honor her Ma, Myra Sullivan. A kind and beautiful lady she was. May she finally rest in peace without having to look over her shoulder for your sorry hours. She was a true angel, loved by everyone who knew her, especially her boys. I know she's happy to be rid of the likes of you as we are. You're gone, but will never be forgotten, Ma. May you rot in hell for all eternity, Patrick Sullivan, and even then it would be too short a time for you in our opinion."
Darby nodded his agreement. Jack then dropped the flame into the pit of hell with his eyes burning with unshed tears of rage and sorrow for the unfairness of it all. Quickly, the flames consumed the casket in a crackling fury, almost reaching the top of the grave. As the fire blazed, Jack and Darby looked on serenely. It climbed higher just as the sky split open and unleashed the rain. They gave the burning pit the one-fingered salute before quickly gathering up their trash and throwing it into the flames. Darby pulled their raincoats out before strapping on the backpack, while Jack wrapped Casey in the blanket, then a raincoat, making sure that he was protected from the downpour. They started down the hill, and Casey stirred sleepily, revealing troubled hazel eyes.
"Is he truly gone, Jackie?"
Casey whispered, as if afraid to believe it. Jack held him closer.
"Identify yourself, Case. He'll not be bothering you again. Get some rest now."
And Casey went back to sleep, a peaceful smile on his face. The rain turned into a torrential downpour. By the time they reached the bottom of the hill, they were exhausted. The trek back to town would be grueling in this weather. Simultaneously, Jack and Darby noticed the black town car parked on the side of the dirt road. 2 men, underneath umbrellas, stood beside it. They appeared to be waiting for the boys. The dark-haired one sported a full beard and wore his hair slicked back in a ponytail. He was a muscular man who stood 6 feet 6 inches tall and wore a lumberjack plaid shirt and well-worn jeans with work boots. Jack recognized him as Alexei Romenkov, the town's richest businessman. The boys nodded respectfully to him, and he returned the gesture. The other man wore a tailored dark suit, and his long, pale blonde hair was pulled back from his angular, tanned face. His expression was intense as he surveyed them through narrowed eyes. He was a stranger, and that was completely unacceptable to the boys, as it was synonymous with danger. Swiftly, Darby pulled his trusty switchblade from his front shirt pocket and placed himself in front of his brothers. The blade in his hand gleamed with deadly intent, matching the promise of violence in his green eyes.
"Who the fuck are you?"
Darby demanded, waving the knife menacingly. Alexei suppressed a smile, while the incredulous blond stranger raised his eyebrows. Calmly, they approached the threesome.
"Young man, if you don't wish for me to give you the proper ass-kicking you rightly deserve, you will put that knife away. Now!"
He spoke sharply, in a gentrified tone. To Jack's surprise, Darby obeyed immediately. Nodding a greeting at Jack, he continued.
"My name is Ian Rusnick, and I knew your mother. In the event that something happened to her, I was to come immediately for you. Unfortunately, I did not hear of her passing until this morning," he added sorrowfully. "My condolences to you, gentlemen." "How do we know you are who you say you are?"
Jack inquired suspiciously. He was unaware his ma had any friends other than the ones his father had allowed her to have, including Alexei's wife, Vivian. She was not allowed to be friends with or interact with any man. Suddenly, Jack was very tired. His arms were heavy from carrying Casey, and it hurt too much to think. He just wanted to get out of the cold and rain and be alone to gather his thoughts. At that question, Darby's blade flicked out again. As Jack glared at the stranger defiantly, he could feel Alexei's astute gaze on him. He dared not look his way because then he would be reminded of his mother's close friendship with the man's wife. For sure, he would lose it. He needed to be strong for his brothers, not bawling like a stupid baby. Thanks to his bastard dad, he was now the head of the Sullivan family. Ian gave Darby a disapproving look. To Jack, he calmly stated, "Loose wall in the pantry." Jack froze, remembering his last conversation with his mother as she furiously whispered to him while his father screamed on the other side of the locked bedroom door. Grabbing his shoulders, Myra looked him in the eye.
"Looks like we've been found out, boy. I want you to take your brothers far from here. You're now in charge, Jackie. Go to the McNally residence. They'll know what to do. Stay off the main road. When this all settles down, the money I've saved for us is in the loose wall in the pantry. Remember that. Loose wall in the pantry. You boys are my greatest loves. Always remember that. And be happy."
She kissed and hugged each of them fiercely. They sobbed quietly as their father's roars filled the house.
"Now go, Jackie. I'm counting on you. Go!"
With tears in her eyes, Moira shoved the bedroom window open for them. Jack knew in his heavy heart that this would be the last time he saw her alive. Grabbing her hand, he pleaded,
"Come with us, Ma."
Moira Sullivan touched her eldest son's face and offered a smile mixed with sorrow, love, and regret.
"Jackie, I'm giving you and your brothers a chance to be free of this hellhole I've created. I wish things could have been different, but they can't. Be happy, Astor."
Straightening up, she coolly commanded,
"Now, as your ma, I order you to leave this house and not look back. Never look back, my love."
And with that, she shoved him halfway out the window. He jumped the short fall to the ground and ran with his brothers toward the woods as they heard the bedroom door burst open. Screams of fury and agony filled the night air. Twice, Jack had to wrestle Darby back as his younger brother tried to return to the house, tears of rage streaming down his face. Casey's cries of terror were shrill, giving Jack a headache, but he forged ahead to their closest neighbor's home, not once looking back.
"Jack."
The sound of Darby's worried voice shook him from his reverie.
"Jack, what should we do?"
"We should go with this man." Ian smiled slightly and reached for Casey. Darby stepped forward.
I'm watching you. You're trying to think stupid, and you'll not live through the night. Do you, Ken?
Plucking Casey up gently from Jack's arms, he tisked Darby while Alexei rumbled with laughter.
Young man, you are entirely too bloodthirsty for your age. Perhaps a stint in the military academy will straighten you out.
Like hell that's happening,
Jack disputed, placing a hand on an agitated Darby's shoulder to calm him.
We stay together, Ian.
His tone was like an Arctic wind, his eyes far wiser than his years. Alexei bellowed with laughter, and Jack sensed his approval. With a snort, Ian calmly replied, "Of course, Jackson. Please, let's leave now and get out of this dreadful weather." As he walked past Ian to the car, Darby muttered under his breath, "City girl."
"Go on, boys. I'll take care of this,"
Alexei urged in his heavily accented English, his gaze approving as he looked up the mountain to the flames burning furiously despite the rain. Jack started to follow his brother to the car, but Ian stopped him. "Want to tell me what happened up there?" he queried, eyeing his new ward speculatively. Jack could see the reflection of the fire in his eyes.
"Bonfire party,"
he murmured, not looking back as he stepped into the safety of the warm vehicle and his new life. Chapter 1. Present. New York City, New York. The door to the study flew open, startling the man who was just about to knock on it. Immediately he stepped out of the way as a ball of fury with a mutinous expression stormed by him, leaving an aromatic cloud of orange blossom and white gardenia in her wake. The scent instantly aroused him, just as it had for the last 4 years whenever he encountered it. He watched as her long legs carried her swiftly toward the front doors, a butler with a bland expression already holding one open for her departure.
"Get back here, Noelle. We are not finished. Noelle! Noelle!"
The older black gentleman shouted furiously from behind his desk, where he stood, waiting for his command to be obeyed. He'll be waiting a while, Jack thought.
"She's gone, Ronald."
He managed to contain his amusement as the normally personable senator, now annoyed, threw himself back into his chair like a petulant child pitching a fit.
"Anything I can help you with?"
Jack was curious as to what would make the ordinarily shy, quiet woman break character and rise like a stormy phoenix. The transformation had been magnificent, he mused, thinking of the fire in her eyes and elevated color to her face. Her movements reminded him of an electric storm back home in Tennessee. Ronald sighed impatiently.
"Noelle's asking me to release some of her money from the trust fund my parents left her so that she and her girlfriend can start that damn event planning business. I don't think it's a good idea. There are already too many companies like that in this city. They'll get swallowed whole by all the bigwigs, and then she'll be out of that money. I tried to explain that to her, and what do I get for my troubles? Ungratefulness and a temper that rivals her mother's to boot."
Jack inwardly cursed the older man for his assumptions. Didn't he know that doubt, not failure, was the biggest killer of dreams? Of course not. Ronald Kramer didn't have a clue. He and his wife, Alicia, came from old money. From birth, he'd been groomed to be a successful politician like his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. His idea of struggling would be whether to wear a crimson tie or a burgundy one.
"How much was she asking for?"
Jack asked casually, hoping his tone conveyed just the right amount of nonchalance.
"By the way, here's the list of charity events that I thought you and Alicia might want to look into sponsoring. I highlighted the ones that are close to the First Lady's heart."
Ronald eagerly accepted the papers.
"Thanks. I'll go over these with Alicia tonight when she gets in from Florida. Noelle wanted a $200,000 advance."
Jack frowned. This was Alicia Kramer's 3rd trip to Florida this month.
"What's going on in Florida?" "We're looking into having a home built there, and she's been scouting properties,"
Ronald replied, flipping through the pages.
"I see a couple of events already that I know she'll want in on. Thank you."
Alicia Kramer, with her coolly unflappable personality, embodied class and manners. Secretly, her staff called her the Robot, as she appeared devoid of emotion. This statement wasn't entirely true, though, because she did have 2 passions: meddling in her family's lives, with tons of unsolicited advice, and Michelle Obama, including her wardrobe. It was stipulated in the Kramers' revised contract with RR&S Relations that Alicia, if possible, was present at every event that Mrs. Obama attended. Jack had to also add his own clause that the Kramers would be on their own if they were deemed a stalking threat due to Alicia's extreme fondness for Mrs. O. Normally, Ronald indulged his wife to her heart's desire, but even he had to draw the line at spending Christmas in Hawaii, so they could accidentally run into the first family. When it came to her passions, Alicia was nuttier than a squirrel's den before winter. It was one of the main reasons that made Jack hesitant to jump into her crosshairs regarding a certain beauty. Not that he'd had much of an opportunity to, considering she avoided him like he had lice whenever they happened to be in the same vicinity. Well, let me know what she likes, and we'll see about getting her in. I'm going to take off now. Call if you need anything. Jack waited until he got into his matte black Range Rover Sport to make the call. The phone rang twice before it was picked up on the other end. A raspy voice with a heavy Long Island accent answered.
Hello.
Ira, it's Jack. How you doing? He greeted his longtime friend and client.
Jack, my boy, I can't complain. Business is booming, but the wife wants me to turn in my reins, retire, and leave the daily grind to our boys. But I says to myself, if I do that, then I might as well give my company away for free, you know?
Before Jack could answer, Ira sighed despondently.
Those two knuckleheads don't got the business sense God gave a sloth. And on top of that, they fight like freaking cats and dogs. All your hard work into establishing our reputation would go down the toilet if I even thought of retiring, Jack.
I'm sorry to hear that, Ira. Perhaps I have a solution that will work for both of us. Already aware of the turmoil at Rothman Investments, Jack had intended to speak to Ira about his spoiled-ass sons. The situation with Noelle Kramer was only accelerating the process.
I'm listening, Ira urged. I love making money, but Maureen won't wait on me forever to give her time. Got to do it while I'm young, you know?
Jack smiled into the phone. Ira was 65 years old and hated the thought of retiring. He would probably die at his desk because he wouldn't make time to go to the hospital. I have a friend with a sound business plan. All that's needed is the funding to make it happen.
Chapter 2. Strawberry rhubarb, cherry lemon curd, sweet potato praline. Pie flavors invaded Noelle Kramer's thoughts while waiting alone in the oversized conference room. She couldn't help it because baking relaxed her, and she'd just recently discovered a love for pie making. Chocolate creme brulee, coconut key lime cream, bananas Foster. Why had she let Sidra talk her into this? Noelle Kramer asked herself anxiously for the 100th time. Lattice, crimped, graham. She'd moved on to crusts now as her mind replayed that conversation. Girl, call Jack. He's a fixer. He'll know what to do. Sidra Barton, one of her two best friends, urged. All the bigwigs use him as a consultant when their image needs polishing. His ideas are brilliant, and he's damn good at what he does. I mean, he does a great job for your dad, right? Jack is a virtual genius and nice, too. Unlike that asshole baby brother of his. Besides, he's so damn forgiving on the eyes. I totally feel like I should pay him just for the view whenever I'm in his company. Sidra finished with her signature husky laugh, and Noelle joined in with a weak one of her own. No one, not even her closest friends, Sidra and Avery Monroe, her other bestie, knew how she felt about Jack Sullivan, and they'd been tight. Sworn to countless secrets since the second week of first grade at Vismore Prep Academy. I just feel so angry and humiliated, not to mention terrified about how this will affect my family, Noelle confided. Inwardly, she cringed at the backlash that would undoubtedly ensue and how her well-respected family would weather it. The Kramer name would forever be tarnished. God, and her mother's reaction? Noelle shuddered at the thought of being on the receiving end of Alicia Kramer's sharp tongue. Last but not least, what would Jack think? Noelle nervously paced the conference room floor, her stomach swirling with butterflies as she waited breathlessly for Jackson Sullivan, PR extraordinaire, a.k.a. the Fixer. A man who walked into a room and commanded everyone's attention without saying a word. His gorgeous, rugged looks took Noelle's breath away, and his swag vibrated at the highest possible frequency. The intensity of his hazel eyes touched her to the very depths of her soul. Over the years, Jack had barely said more than a handful of sentences to her, but it was enough to make her heart race just the same. Nothing sexual, just simple shit like, "Hi, how are you?" But he possessed a deep, slow, southern drawl that was insanely sexy and made country crooner Sam Hunt's voice sound like Pee Wee Herman. Whenever Jack spoke, all she heard was, "I want to make you scream with my tongue." So perhaps there was a bit of a lost in translation problem, which usually resulted in her gaping at him like an idiot, and that was the reason she tended to avoid him whenever possible. Whenever they were at the same functions, Noelle could hardly look at Jack. She was afraid that everyone would see her ill-concealed yearning for him. Her nights, though, were filled with visions of his brawny, muscular body totally dominating hers, and often she'd awake having to finish off what was started in her wildest fantasies. Not that those dreams would ever turn into reality. In Jack's presence, all Noelle ever felt from him was pity. Since her parents were his clients and her godfather was one of his business partners, Jack was often exposed to various stages of Operation Fix Noelle. Interventions staged to save her by her overly caring and too nosy for their own damn good family. As he stared at her with those unreadable hazel eyes, Noelle could feel Jack's disgust at how pathetic she was, rolling off of him in waves. He would excuse himself as if he could hardly stand to be in the same room with someone as pitiful as her, and she wanted to die 1,000 deaths from embarrassment. The run-ins weren't as bad now that Noelle rarely saw Jack, since she'd finally moved out of the Kramer's fortress. Against her parents' protests, she decided to move forward with her business plans after receiving a pre-approved loan offer in the mail. The letter was almost too good to be true, as it outlined plans for helping small business owners to achieve their dreams. But Noelle knew she had to try. Much to her surprise, her request for a loan was approved, and the owner of the investment firm, Mr. Rothman, had worked closely with her and her business partner, best friend Avery, to ensure they were prepped for success. The event planning company, On a Whim, which they co-owned, was off to a promising start, with a steady stream of small businesses with scheduled events. Just 2 weeks ago, they were asked by an aristocratic polo player to plan his birthday party without even proposing a bid. It had the potential to be the highlight of the season and would definitely open doors for On a Whim. The ladies could hardly contain themselves. Since they were little, the ladies had dreamed of organizing something on this scale. Avery would cut flowers from the Kramer garden and make pretty arrangements for their tea parties, while Noelle baked scones and prepared sandwiches. Sidra provided the music with the mixed tapes she'd created and beatboxing until it was time to eat. Now they were all grown up, turning their dreams into reality. Noelle was in charge of menu planning and catering. Avery was in charge of entertainment and decor. Currently, they were working out of their homes to save money for an office space. Sidra was still DJing, but worked for Jack's firm as well. The growing enterprise was a good thing because it afforded Noelle less time to think about the one man she couldn't have. But now, she needed his help and would resort to begging if needed. The door slowly opened, and she stilled herself in anticipation of seeing the man she'd been desperately in love with since she was 21 years old walk through it. Jack, with his phone glued to his ear, hurried through the elevator doors of the 10th floor office suites of his business, RR&S Public Relations. The crisis he was presently handling involved the current Miss World beauty, Inez Gaines, and her now ex-drug-dealing boyfriend, Jimmy Vasquez, who'd supplied copious amounts of drugs to 2 of the 3 judges on the panel in exchange for her winning the title. The truth was discovered this morning when, during a heated lover's quarrel, he decided to throw it in her face that she would not have the title if it weren't for him. After blackening his eye, Inez promptly informed Jack and the authorities